Recently, multiple political pundits and online commentators have been commenting on a certain trend among the socialist leftists. It's apparent that the trend reveals itself because of the run-up to the presidential elections. In the course of this video we will try to examine, respond and counsel on the grievances the two sides of the argument have. Firstly, let's look at the stories people were commenting on. Most of these stories were relevant in the first quarter of 2020. Here is a rank C hero, actual justice warrior, talking about the Young Turks unionization being shut down by its owner, and rank A hero, Cenk Uygur.
Now look, I am largely speculating on what was the inciting incident for the formation of the TYT union, but what I'm looking at is what I'm seeing in the articles from anonymous staffers and trying to align the timeline with something in TYT's history that seems to make a lot of sense. I'm also trying to put myself in the perspective of somebody who works on the production side of TYT and is not making a lot of money, and what would make me angry enough to end up forming a union, and forming a union that intends on sandbagging my employer during his congressional run. Also, Cenk's nephew is not with the company, and it has no relation to the Dan Crenshaw incident, which happened all the way back in August, because he was basically fired from the company in the start of the new year. This makes a lot of sense when you put the pieces together, because Cenk's nephew is a communist, and even though he was handed a job by his uncle, he's made it clear that he supports the unionization drive, and there was this debate between Cenk and his nephew on the Young Turks channel on Cenk's nephew's show Agitprop, where Cenk's nephew tries to convince him on air that not only should he be handed a job, but he should be made part owner, and the Young Turks as a business should convert into a co-op.
And that actually brings us to, I guess, the second point that I wanted to get to in this conversation, which is, if you believe that democracy works in the level of governance, why don't you believe that we can implement democracy in the workplace, especially considering that adults spend 80% of their entire lives inside of these corporations, and these corporations are absolutely authoritarian in its structure. Yeah. There is a top-down power structure, and that contributes significantly to alienation.
Top-down power structure? Is Cenk at the top of this specific power structure? But Hasan's argument has a familiar form, doesn't it? It goes something like, if you like X in this general situation, why wouldn't you like X in this situation under your control? You can substitute X for democracy or cooperative or socialism or redistribution. Or, indeed, any behavior.
Cheap shit. The cheap shit's like, well, this is $200, that's $200, this is $200. And the total he gave me is like $1,000. I'm like, oh, come on, dude. Like, come on. Like, it's because you look rich? Bitch, I'm at a fucking Toyota dealership. Like, what do you mean? I have a 2011 Camry Sport. What are you guys, Destiny fans? Like, they all keep saying, like, I wear designer Supreme shirts or something. What the fuck is wrong with these nerds, man? I was reading one of these threads, and it just, like, made me lose my mind. These guys are like, claims to be a socialist, but he's wearing thousands and thousands of dollars of designer gear. Like, I've never, what the fuck have I worn that's designer, dude? Sorry, that was like a total tangent on a side note, but the fuck, these people literally sound like the alt-right. Like, they sound just as stupid as Sargon fans now. Like, it's just, they've molded to a point where they're just like, oh, preaches about socialism and yet lives in a designer apartment with his designer dog and his designer garb. God damn, dude.
This is an older example of both the accusation and the rebuttal. Rank B hero Hasan is responding to the fact that he is well off by most standards of global society, and yet instead of sharing whatever wealth he has, he advocates for socialism, meaning he advocates the more wealthy to share the wealth first. His rebuttal to this accusation is that sounds stupid and alt-right for having a stupid form. Which unfortunately is not an argument. Curiously, however, it is the same form he used to convince his uncle to redistribute his power and wealth in the Young Turks company, to Hasan himself, among others. Someone could say this is hypocrisy, or rather hypocrisy inside a hypocrisy, betraying a hidden motive for wanting redistribution, but really wanting power. Perhaps it is simply a contradiction that needs resolution. But I would like to offer a look at this from a cold, detached, evolutionary and deterministic perspective. Hasan wanting to take Cenk down a peg is nothing new in the animal world, it's just a younger male trying to dethrone an older male, and as such is natural. It would also be natural for the older male to try to defend from dethroning. Actual justice warrior seems to agree with Cenk.
And overall, with the union drive, I also agree with Cenk that it would be a bad idea for the Young Turks. Now, a lot of people get all excited about the $20 million investment that the Young Turks recently received, but that's an investment, that's not revenue. They expect a return on that investment. They're not giving the Young Turks money based on charity. And one of the big reflections of the fact that they expect a return on that investment was the mass layoffs of nearly half the staff at the Young Turks almost a year after the investment went in. Obviously, they had a lot of underperforming shows on the network, and if you're someone who's investing money in a company, you don't want to lose money on all the employees that the Young Turks tried to hire in order to maximize a return on that investment. And this isn't something that's unique to the Young Turks. We've seen a lot of progressive independent media get venture capital money, have their staff unionize, and then all of a sudden they have to lay off hundreds of employees. Vice is one of the best examples of this, because of all you can say about the $20 million that the Young Turks got, Vice had a partnership with HBO. I believe at one point they were doing 2 series with the company, and yet they still had to lay off like 100 or so employees in the middle of that era when all the digital media companies, especially on the progressive side, were laying off hundreds of employees. These business models are not sustainable.
Notably, Sean, also known as Actual Justice Warrior, cites other examples of unionization that lead to firing, especially in alternative media space in the year 2019. This would include unionization attempts at rank B hero Carlos Maza's company Vaush. Meanwhile, the self-identified anarcho-syndicalist, C-rank hero Vaush, also known as Irish Laddie, had found himself banned from YouTube, but landed a few debates around that period. In just the first quarter of 2020, he debated rank B hero Sargon of Akkad, Class A hero Stefan Molyneux, and finally, his former mentor whom had previously been avoiding him, Class B hero Destiny. Most of those debates revolved loosely around subjects dear to Vaush's interests, poverty and the worker cooperatives. Here's a clip from Destiny vs. Vaush, depicting a familiar disagreement.
Wait, what? You do? Wait, the unemployment being low doesn't mean that you can just instantly find a fucking job when you move. You would say this. The opportunity cost of moving is substantial. It's not just the first and last month you put down as deposit.
College student world.
What the fuck do you don't know, Destiny? You don't know anything about me.
Mr. Mommy and Daddy paid for your school. I promise you I know more than you about this, okay?
Then respond to the fucking arguments rather than characterizing what I have to say. The first and last month's rent deposit, the actual cost of moving, the opportunity cost of leaving your job, these are huge institutional barriers that you don't give a fuck about because you're so triggered by the left.
Lefty dumb shit. Let me know
what argument have I made that's leftist? This is social democracy.
Being a man who gathered considerable wealth and notoriety throughout years 2016 to 2019, rank B hero Destiny clearly finds himself on the side of the argument that does not find all wealthy people, including himself, to be automatically immoral. He seems to be noticing the same pattern that other personalities found, children of wealthy parents, or otherwise well-situated families advocating for socialism. Vaush's parents work in Hollywood. Hasan barely ended his work for Young Turks, and Carlos Maza just had an article released about the wealth of his parents. Here is a rank C hero short fat otaku, or SFO, agreeing with Destiny on opposing authoritarian communist regimes, but also on recognizing that not all millionaires are exploitative.
And bending over backwards to authoritarian regimes while doing so. Absolutely. You must have all heard about this, right? Apple, Samsung, and Sony among 83 global brands using Uyghur Muslim forced labor in factories. This is a case of multinational corporations actually using slavery, and we can definitely call it slavery. The Uyghur Muslims are currently being genocided by China. What they do is they arrest them on a trumped-up charge. The charge usually being something like being too Muslim or not being communist enough, some BS like that. Resisting Sinicization, maybe. And then, once they're in the prison system, they're put to work. So everyone seems to be okay with forced labor since they're technically criminals, even though they haven't done anything wrong. Here's the list of all 83 companies currently exploiting Uyghur slave labor in China. Abercrombie & Fitch, Acer, Adidas, Alstom, Amazon, Apple, Asus, Bike Motor? BMW, Bombardier, Bosch, BYD, Calvin Klein, Candy, Carter's, Cerruti 1881, Changan Automobile, Cisco, CRRC, Dell, Electrolux, Fila, Founder Group, GAC Group, Gap, Geely Auto, General Motors, Google, Goertech, H&M, Haier, Hart Schaffner Marx, Hisense, Hitachi, HP, HTC, Huawei, iFlyTech, Jack & Jones, Jaguar, Japan Display, LL Bean, Lacoste, Land Rover, Lenovo, LG, Li Ning, Marks & Spencer, Mayor, Mizu, Mercedes-Benz, MG, Microsoft, Mitsubishi, Mitsumi, Nike, Nintendo, Nokia, The North Face, Oculus, Oppo, Panasonic, Polo Ralph Lauren, Puma, Roe, Psych Motor? Is this related to Bike Motor? Samsung, SGMW, Sharp, Siemens, Skechers, Sony, TDK, Tommy Hilfiger, Toshiba, Tshingwa Tongfang, Uniqlo, Victoria's Secret, Vivo, Volkswagen, Xiaomi, Zara, Zynga, and ZTE. So whenever the right wing of politics says that there's nothing wrong with the uber rich, I don't want to hear it. Everyone is capable of absolute evil, and that includes people with money. And the CEOs of each and every single one of these companies is currently profiting off of slavery. So I get it when some people say eat the rich. But at the same time, I do have to say, hashtag not all rich people. PewDiePie exposed an entire generation to anti-Semitism and racism, and he's a multimillionaire. Sorry if I don't cry when he gets robbed. I can't believe this is a controversy on the left. How exactly do you think the revolution is going to go down? We ask them nicely? And here's the fundamental problem with the left's view on this topic. PewDiePie is a multimillionaire. However, from what I've seen, he definitely takes care to make sure he's not exploiting anybody. All of his merch isn't made in a Chinese sweatshop somewhere. It's made in Canada, by a company that actually pays their workers a fair wage.
SFO brings the example of Rank A hero PewDiePie, who explicitly makes sure his merchandise is sourced ethically. In that sense, PewDiePie is living his principle. But this isn't the only thing Destiny and SFO agree on. They both find it puzzling that homosexuality of a billionaire takes a backseat when it comes to stripping them down from their wealth and position, even if it's familial.
And then you get people who go mask off this hard. This is over somebody protesting Buttigieg by promoting his hanging. Jesus. Can you let me know why there's a screenshot floating around of you promoting the hanging of the first major LGBTQ candidate for president? Please tell me this is fake. Because if it's not, that's going to be an issue. The DNC would surely need to get involved. If it's not true, please advise now. 1, I'm gay, so okay. 2, I didn't threaten him. I said he deserves the same as billionaires. You're gay, so you can promote the hanging of gay people? That doesn't make any sense. I am so upset that this is true. To promote the hanging of those you disagree with is just wrong on so many levels. I'll be contacting the Texas Democrats. This is unacceptable. Only billionaires and those who serve them. I never said anything actionable, so whatever. I think Pete is a ladder-climbing sociopath. I couldn't give a fuck if he's gay. He's a shitty, self-serving asshole who works for billionaires. That's your opinion. One of you advocates the hanging of political enemies, the other debates them. Seems to me he's not the sociopath between the two of you. Anyways, I'll leave you alone. Wouldn't want you to be late to that lynching you have planned later. Frankly, I prefer guillotines anyway. I'm sure you do. These are the radicals that the left has courted over the past decade or so. And they're finally beginning to reap what they've sown. Simply being rich is enough to get you on their hit list. Even if you...
Destiny, however, knows how deep this particular argument goes, and we will allow ourselves for a short digression. Stephen, Destiny, Bonell, now strongly suspects, although he does not yet understand why, that the temporary alliance between LGBT movements and socialist movements is just that, temporary.
Yeah, but there have been socialist societies or communist societies or worker-ran societies that have also, like, tried to kill Jewish people or gay people. Like, that's not just a... That's never happened. That's not true.
That's not a thing would happen because in a communism society, racism doesn't work.
Be my guest if you want to rewind and play that again. Otherwise, let's go back to talking about our socialist younger males, wealth, poverty and the relationship between their familial situation, the policies they propose and the ones they live by. Here is a clip from SFO video on the subject of eating the rich.
And speaking of governments forcing businesses to be co-ops, remember when Vaush the brainlet in his debate with Sargon said that that's exactly what should happen? That businesses should be forced to be co-ops because they're more just, they're more moral, they're more productive, they're better for everyone? Well, let's listen to Vaush talk about why his business shouldn't be a co-op.
So you are a monopolist owner of a means of production called the Vaush channel. I had a look through your channel. It's not a gotcha thing. I'm genuinely curious. And you seem to be the host of every show. And so I'm kind of curious why the people who work with you don't get to host your show. In other words, why don't you take your channel and do what you suggest is the best thing to do, have other people host your channel, share your profits with them, get them involved, rather than paying them in this cold, dry calculations of mutual utility stuff. Why don't you put your theories into practice?
Yeah, I do think there are reasonable thresholds of worker participation behind which it's not reasonably expected that you should adopt a cooperative model. For my case, an example, I probably do about like 95% of the work to keep the channel afloat. I mean,
but you wouldn't if you let other people host, right?
Well, that is true. I could spread the work around more, but the main reason why I think the co-op model is essential, and broadly speaking, is because it is a solution to this very particular type of wage exploitation that we see in the traditionally run firm. And
But that's what you were talking about with the people you pay. Why don't you invite them in to collectively own your channel rather than pay them? If the wage paying is exploitive.
Yeah, because I do not think that the exploitation model is descriptive when we're talking about people who aren't expected to supply consistent wage labor to whatever firm it is they participate in. So just because a person, for example, like I might shoot them a message on Discord like once or twice a month or something and be like, hey, can you cut down this video from the DNC debates? I'll give you $200 or $300. Just because they have that level of engagement, while I do agree there is a fundamental level of inequality in the relationship between us in that bargaining system, I don't believe that type of exploitation is one which should be ameliorated with a worker-owned collective. Now, I will say...
Wait,
and
so
that
it's
is
for other
just a
people,
product-
not for you, right?
Well, no, I hardly think the way I run my channel is in any way comparable to like a business.
His fundamental argument here is that I'm not rich enough. It wouldn't work for me. I'm not the rich you should be eating. And then, of course, there's Bernie Sanders saying millionaires a lot less often. In 2016, he was all about taking on the millionaires and billionaires. This time around, though, he only talks about the billionaires.
Millionaires, billionaires, billionaires, millionaires, billionaires, millionaires, and billionaires.
Oh, Sanders himself became a millionaire in 2016 as he vaulted into the national consciousness. Book deals drove more money into his pockets.
There is a lot here. Firstly, Vaush's response to Stefan's question is exactly the same as Cenk's answer to Hasan's question. You'll find that in Akkad Prop episode 1 around 46-minute mark. And the answer is, depends on the size of the company. Vaush had a chance here to give any number of stronger arguments, but he settled for this one. This will become relevant later. Secondly, our first S-rank hero appears and is being dragged for his own version of the millionaire advocating for socialism contradiction. This is especially relevant not only because of the presidential run, but because leaked footage of Sanders's campaign organizers shows them advocating for political violence, again of course in the service of stripping the rich of their resources. Listen to this C-rank hero.
Nazi. There's a reason Joseph Stalin had gulags, right? And actually gulags were a lot better than what the CIA has told us that they were. Like, people were actually paid a living wage in gulags. They had conjugal visits in gulags. Gulags were actually meant for re-education. The greatest way to break a fucking billionaire of their privilege and their idea that they're superior, go out and break rocks for 12 hours a day. You're now a working class person, and you're gonna...
Of course the billionaires would have to include Cenk, Maza's parents, Destiny, along with anyone with rank A and above. What explains this aggression towards the rich? Sure, for now it's merely words and memes, but we know anything that is ironic, like Vaush's co-op shirt stylized with a hammer and sickle, can quickly become unironic. In fact, Molyneux rejected debating Destiny specifically because of the stance on political violence. Here is a rank A hero, Jordan Peterson, describing something that has some explanatory power in this subject.
So now, this doesn't eliminate the difference in individual differences in determining who's going to be aggressive, because what will happen is that as the Gini coefficient pressure rises, the more aggressive men, the men who are more aggressive by nature, will get more aggressive first, right? So you can imagine it's a threshold phenomenon in some sense. So, and what I should tell you as well is the relationship between the Gini coefficient and male-on-male homicide isn't like 0.2 or 0.3, which is about the correlation that you'd get if you were predicting something like that using personality. It's like 0.8 or 0.9. It's like it eats up all of it. It's the explanation. So it's a huge effect. It's so big an effect that you can basically say, oh, well, we figured that out, although psychologists never know when they figured anything out, and they keep endlessly retesting it over and over and over because, we don't know how to bring our science to a stop. But if you don't accept the Gini coefficient aggression data, it's like you might as well throw the rest of social sciences out the window because the effect is unbelievably. The relationship between income inequality and male homicide is like 0.75. It just covers all of it, which is to say that everywhere that everyone's poor, there's no male homicide. And everywhere that everyone's rich, there's no male homicide. But places where there's poor people and rich people, the male homicide rate goes way the hell up, right? Especially if it's a steep distribution, because the men at the bottom think, somebody has a lot more than me, and that's not very fair. I'm going to do something about that, and that usually means killing other men. And so it's unbelievably powerful relationship. That's a useful thing to keep squirreled away in your imagination. Poverty does not cause crime. Relative poverty causes crime. That is a completely different thing.
Let's disregard criticisms of the Gini coefficient for a moment and the slight discrepancy between the correlation in both clips. It still means there is a strong correlation between aggression and the economic inequality in a society. And it's the aggressive ones that get aggressive. It doesn't matter if they are black, white supremacist, communist, rich or poor. When the society is economically unequal, the prone to aggression will get aggressive. Okay, so the communists are justified? We should pack it up? America is unequal and their aggression is supported by science? Not at all. Just because we know the correlation is strong, we don't know its direction. It could be that the relation is mutual. Meaning the more aggressive the society, the more the inequality advances and vice versa. Which would mean instituting measures to alleviate aggression and inequality on a personal level could actually help lessen the effect. We're back to square one, where we have to apply socialism personally, and on top of that we have to curb violence. Man, that sucks. Well, at least we figured one more thing out. Vaush is relatively poor compared to his parents and to Destiny. Hasan is relatively poor compared to Cenk and even Anna. Carlos Maza is relatively poor compared to his parents. Destiny, however, is relatively well off compared to his parents. For some reason, this realization does not hit Vaush, but he does come across that rank B hero. Sargon of Akkad discovered the rich parent to socialist child pipeline.
Sargon discovers the existence of this Maza guy.
In his videos, he cites Marxist ideas, and he
Yes.
openly calls them Marxist.
Yep.
So it's pretty obvious what his political persuasion is.
Yep.
He's a friend of the working man,
Yep.
is what it is. And he he attacked Stephen Crowder and his YouTube channel back in May 2019 and successfully managed to get it demonetized, though not deplatformed.
I like the framing of this. For those of you who don't remember, this was after Stephen Crowder made a long-term systemic series of attacks against Carlos Maza, to the extent that Carlos Maza was getting hundreds of insults and death threats like every time that he would wake up, including Stephen Crowder just making fun of his lisps and calling him a queer and shit. And Stephen Crowder did, of course, the socialism is for fag shirt. So all a great meme. But
couldn't get them to actually take it down, but he could get them to take away Stephen Crowder's income.
Yeah, Crowder tried to sell a shirt that said Carlos Maza is a fag. So, I mean, this all violates YouTube TOS. I don't give a fuck about Crowder. I don't give a fuck what he does with himself in his private time, or how long a walk he takes off a short pier.
Which I thought was totally unfair, given how YouTube had said that Crowder had actually done nothing wrong in calling Maza a lispy queer, because, well, it's just bants, isn't it? But no, Carlos Maza goes in this mad...
What are we on about?
We will disregard all of the insults and also the inaccuracies in the ways both sides are familiar with the case of Carlos Maza versus Stephen Crowder. Instead, from here on out we will try to steelman the main counter-argument, because it seems to be representative and pervasive. It also seems to function mimetically. Here is the counter-argument.
Right, that's it. I will go to YouTube, the platform that I hate, that creates monsters, and I shall start a career there as...
So, the theme here is, I'm going to say it, retards like Sargon of Akkad and Stefan Molyneux, their one joke or their one argument is imagining hypocrisy. That is their one argument. Notice how he's laughing here. He thinks he's really gotten Carlos Maza. Carlos Maza has criticized YouTube's enforcement of TOS, and now Carlos Maza is gonna make a YouTube channel.
If Vaush is correct that this is the only argument they have, just knock it down, right? Criticizing YouTube while on YouTube either is or isn't a contradiction. But of course Sargon is speaking to the other, much more important and more often referenced type of contradiction, advocating for redistribution of wealth while having wealthy family. Vaush rightly notices that Sargon himself criticizes YouTube on YouTube. It is, however, unbelievable that either Sargon nor Vaush believe that criticizing YouTube while on YouTube is the more prescient point. Moreover, even if we accepted that both Sargon's and Vaush's hypocrisies were the same, why would hypocrisy of one man excuse the hypocrisy of another? The form of the argument is very similar to Hasan's. If you don't like institution X, why do you operate within that institution personally? It does not logically follow that one should be out of an institution or organization or a platform when they want to criticize it. On the contrary, in some cases it would be beneficial to remain in the institution or platform to criticize it because we mean well for it. We want to make it better. For instance, you can criticize, even hunt pedophilia in the Catholic Church, but it does not follow you should quit the church because its problem with pedophile priests. In fact, perhaps it is imperative for the removal of pedophiles from church that you stay within it. Perhaps Sargon and Carlos Maza both want YouTube to be better, but they disagree on what better means. However, only one of them personally caused an avalanche of pressure on advertisers, and repercussions for many creators, including ones from minority groups.
I mean, what could we really be drawing about your family here? Let's see. My mum and her fiancé are very wealthy, thanks to a software company they started together when I was a kid. As a result, I've gotten to live a life of tremendous privilege. I'm not to go to college without
He's laughing very hard. Can somebody explain to me the joke in chat? Is it you can't be a socialist if you had a wealthy childhood?
And take low-paying internships when I graduated without worrying about rent or health insurance. Right. It's all starting to come together now, isn't it? It's all starting to fall into place.
What's that quote? If you're poor and you're a socialist, they call you bitter. If you're rich and you're a socialist, they call you guilty.
Here we have both the main argument and the rebuttal, and a seemingly very real grievance that no matter what your status is, you are still being called some sort of a name for being socialist, which would suggest the criticism of socialism is insincere. Perhaps if the Gini coefficient or aggression were lower, there would not be a need to call poor socialists jealous, although some of them surely are, or calling rich socialists hypocrites, although surely some of them are. And so we should be asking, how do we tell which socialists are just jealous? Instead, Vaush is asking us, why can't one be wealthy and advocate for socialism? In the previous clip, Vaush was suggesting the two situations are similar, but we are already seeing they are not. That argument here, and I'm sure both Sargon and Vaush know this, is dissimilar to advocating for X while not being X, or Hasan's liking X in one broad situation, should mean liking X in a situation under your control. The reason is, it's not the mere fact of having contradictory stances that is being critiqued here, and it's not why Sargon is laughing. Sargon is laughing because everyone knows, including Vaush, we are being asked about the efficiency of the proposed system, and the personal failure to live the ideals by individuals like Maza, Vaush and to a lesser extent Hasan, since by the looks of it he at least tried to unionize the Young Turks, makes us suspicious they either don't understand this, or don't really believe these measures would work.
If I say, hey, it's bad for people to use this a particular type of toy, because that toy was made with rape. It was a rape toy. It was made by rape. And then you say, can't help but notice you've got 5 of those toys over there. That may well be true, but you must notice that it is not an argument against what I have said.
Whether or not it is bad to possess toys made with rape entirely depends on how we feel about rape. Perhaps in this hypothetical we don't care about rape so much. It would also have to work for PewDiePie's shirts and Chinese sweatshops. What Vaush does not understand is that if everyone justified their possession of rape toys the way Vaush just did, we would have a lot more rape toys, and also supposedly a lot more rape would have happened to create them. Conversely, if everyone who condemns pedophilia quits the church, would it not be reasonable to observe more pedophilia in the church? After all, we've made everyone who opposes pedophilia quit the church. And so, if you don't practice cooperative work models yourself, it follows you will not have good ones to present as examples in an argument. In other words, Vaush is correct that him being a hypocrite is not an argument against worker co-ops. He is, however, admitting to hypocrisy, and it is that hypocrisy that makes the world a bit of a worse place for people who believe worker co-ops are good. Somehow it would be hard for us to imagine someone adamantly insisting everyone else should be vegan, using many arguments including efficiency of the diet, while themselves not being vegan. Translated to Vaush language it would sound something like this: why do I have to be vegan to want everyone else to be vegan?
Because it's a way for people to give the impression they're owning you without ever actually addressing your argument. It's best summed up, of course, in this, possibly, I think we can all agree, the most influential political comic of our time. This is like the stuff that'll get put into history books, folks. We all know it. We've seen it a million times. This is the defining political comic of our generation. Nothing Boris does will ever come even close to the majesty and the prescience of this comic. Sargon did it in his debate with me. Crowder did it like 3 or 4 times in the video we just watched. In my debate with Steven Crowder. Can I pull that up really quick? Is that possible? By the way, if you want to know like the rest of this video, it's literally just Sargon faking a laugh while he reads out the fact that a socialist was like wealthy as a kid. That's the whole thing. You want to see?
I've spent my professional life trying to use that privilege to advocate for a better world. Not for Steven Crowder or his employees, you can use that privilege.
Too bad Vaush dismissed Sargon at the end of this clip, else he would find Sargon finally making something of an argument. In any case, Vaush also seems to think it is enough to point some sort of contradiction, in this case a meme contained within a comic, to be done and not have to provide a counter-argument. And to be fair to the meme, it goes something like, just because you live in a society that does X, doesn't mean you can't want to take X out of the society. Again, nothing in this meme accounts for the personal responsibility of not getting the rape toys. If everyone was led to believe, by this comic or Vaush, that all it takes for X to change in the society is talking about it, nobody would ever take the action of stopping X behavior. People would still be buying rape toys, ordering goods produced in sweatshops and not redistributing wealth. Unless Vaush starts a co-op, the comic provides him as much of a cover as it would for a person who advocates everyone else turns vegan, but they themselves were not one, even though they could be.
Is that how you spell daily? Jesus Christ. The memes come full circle, because after that, where is it? The astounding hypocrisy of socialists. This is how Sargon puts my name in his mouth after I blow his asshole open in our second debate. This video is no shit, in part, about how I'm a hypocrite for not worker co-oping my channel.
But Vaush has admitted himself to being a hypocrite in this subject. So far he only argued his hypocrisy does not count as an argument. Moreover, up until now he has not yet presented a case of why it does not count as an argument. If we get past insults towards Molyneux and Sargon, we get to a part where he kind of tries.
But I'll answer it right now. YouTube owns the means of production. I do not. I am the means of production for the channel. I don't own a business, and I don't have employees.
I don't own the means of production, but I am the means of production? Being and having a means of production is functionally the same, especially for creative work. This is not hypocrisy, as these circumstances are out of Vaush's control, but it is a contradiction. We're still looking for the actual argument.
Nothing about worker co-ops mean that you have to hire a minimum number of people. Like if you're doing a solo operation, you have to hire everyone full-time. Nothing about worker co-op advocacy means believing people should make their YouTube channels worker co-ops. Nothing about my channel is eligible for what worker co-ops advocate for. If you think there is a hypocrisy in me saying we need to put businesses of a certain threshold into some sort of worker cooperative system, and you're responding with, well, why don't you worker co-op your one-person YouTube channel then, where you call upon the work of others with extreme infrequency, then you are a moron who is not making an argument.
Nothing about unionization means you have to have hired a minimum number of people. Like if you are Cenk Uygur, you have to let your workers unionize. Nothing about unionization advocacy means believing progressive media channel owners should allow their employees to unionize. Nothing about Cenk's channel means it's eligible for what unions advocate for. This is how Vaush would sound if he was Cenk Uygur. In fact, any argument Vaush makes for why his channel shouldn't be a co-op would give ammunition to Cenk, Vox and Vice on why they shouldn't allow their workers to unionize. At the same time, Vaush is saying that the size of something determines if it's eligible for unionization. Anarchists are however sensitive to authority, and therefore a size determination for a company should seem arbitrary to them. Even if we would let Vaush and Cenk decide the size of the company, it would be hard for them to even suggest one. But at least this is an attempt. It's not the strongest one that could be hoped for, but it passes for an argument. It's also consistent with what he told Molyneux. This makes it the second time the best Vaush can think of as an actual argument against requests for explanation why he isn't implementing co-ops, is that the size of his existing business is too small. Notably, while talking to Molyneux, he did not stress as hard as here how hypocrisy is not an argument.
That means that if, by the way, I ran a real worker co-op, like an actual business that I own cooperatively, so I wouldn't run it, but I'd be part of, I suppose, like the managerial branch. What? What the fuck? Managerial branch. Even if I did that, he would look at it. He would look at this perfect, like, flat hierarchy on a worker co-op, and he would say, well, you say you like worker co-ops, but I can't help but notice that you don't bring in homeless people and give them half of your money too.
Perfectly flat hierarchy, huh? In the hierarchy of arguments and clips, I've decided to mostly only include the ones that contain arguments. Vaush did a lot of performance and ad hominem. I've cut most of that out, and even let slide some inaccuracies that would derail the subject matter. But this one is just too baffling to pass up on. Did you ever have a friend who had no physical coordination and yet boasted he could do a star, a handstand, backflip or some other acrobatic maneuver, but when you asked them to show it to you they just hopped, wiggled in the air a bit, pretended to land and turned with a face to you that expresses an absolutely sincere belief they just did the backflip when their feet barely left the ground? Well, I had that friend, and that's how Vaush looks to me here. Perfectly flat hierarchy, my ass. This will definitely require pictures. So here is figure 1. Here is a group of people, workers in the company, let's say. Usually hierarchies are represented by a pyramid, a depiction which helps make explicit the relationship between a number of people in a class and their powers and responsibilities. And so on the top we have 2 managers, below them 3 shift supervisors and cashiers, and below them 4 toilet scrubbers and servers. The managers have power over remaining classes of workers, but at the same time are the ones to be held responsible if toilets are not scrubbed or customers are not served. Now, Vaush is supposedly describing a cooperative model with no hierarchy. So well, put all of the workers in a row. But then Vaush says he would be a managerial branch? So let's color Vaush and one more person red to signify a communist managerial branch. We have to assume there is a toilet scrubbing branch too. I mean, this is what our company was doing before we implemented the cooperative model. So let's color 5 people yellow to signify the toilet scrubbers. If your acrobatic orientation is not malfunctioning, you should already be seeing that a backflip was not performed. Vaush's feet never left the ground. This is still the same hierarchical organization, but instead of using space to signify position in the hierarchy, we used the colors. Some people can't tell the most likely self-inflicted sleight of hand. Vaush, just like my childhood friend, genuinely believes he described 2 different systems. If you are well coordinated, well read and smart, you are not just seeing a funny mistake, but instead you see a tragedy in the making. In this mistake, this misunderstanding of human organization, the natural way hierarchies want to create themselves, you will see how someone like Stalin could end up on top of something that wasn't. That wasn't supposed to even have a top in the first place. Communists don't understand hierarchies because they can't. Okay, so now we have a part of explanation about how you want X, but you don't do X yourself, is actually an argument against X. Their reasons are, 1, because doing X yourself most likely causes general X to happen. 2, because if everyone rejected doing X, conceding the original proposition is not an argument, then there wouldn't be a person to ever do X. And 3, because any arguments for not doing X yourself can be used by your own side to take away your ability of doing X even if you wanted to. But I can't escape thinking there is more to it. That beyond the steel manon of the positions of people like Vaush, Hasan and Maza, there is an argument that is stronger than any they have presented themselves, but it remains unspoken. It has something to do with what Molyneux was implying, the cooperative system being inefficient. Now I am not saying that it is inefficient, I am just wondering why the dodge. And so the following will be my attempt to give socialists their due and to go beyond the steel manning of their arguments. Let's assume that for some weird reason, even though the socialists keep laughing at, you want X, but you don't do X yourself, X could actually happen. For instance, a legislation is passed that mandates X. That would mean there is a preference for everyone to do X at the same time, rather than X being proved from the ground up. Vaush, Hasan and Carlos and even Destiny, unless something changed, would gladly give up part of their power or wealth, so long as everyone else did the same at the same time. Kinda seems fair, right? I mean, no one in their right mind would give up a portion of their wealth first in hopes someone much more wealthy than themselves would keep their end of the bargain. So basically, Vaush is not doing the cooperative because he wants people who are more wealthy than him to do a cooperative first. This seems like a completely rational fear of being betrayed and fucked over. This is the best I can do for the socialists. Even if the fear of betrayal is the best they have, we could not agree with them. Especially after everything we've seen so far. Firstly, because it's an admission that giving up wealth makes you inefficient or less competitive. Secondly, the fear is well grounded. The richest people on earth do not pay taxes and avoid equalization by any means necessary already. They bank offshore in tax havens. They use tax-exempt foundations and charities as money laundering schemes. The Fortune 500 isn't even the top 500 people who command the most wealth if you take foundations into account. Fortunes like Getty's were built on tax-exempt foundations. The hereditary magnate families like the Rockefellers are not even blips on Vaush's or even Destiny's radars, yet fortunes like these dwarf Fortune 500. The socialists are never getting their taxes for their programs. In this situation, forming cooperatives and unions, sharing your own wealth no matter how much you have of it, is really the only moral and effective thing a socialist can do. Either that, or wait for their parents to die, claim inheritance, then quickly forget how 10 years earlier you were strongly advocating for either taxing inheritance or having the government appropriate inheritance altogether. Perhaps with inheritance Vaush, Hasan and Carlos would finally feel something to lose, even if only relatively, and their perspective would change. I wish them that this happens, that they get a chance to manage something and succeed or fail, and learn from it. I guess this pretty much covers it. Now that you've gotten to the end, it's time for some bonus memes.
With left-leaning people, man, dude, I gave more, and it was funny because in the beginning of my dealing with left-leaning people, my community rose to the fuck for how gentle I was with a lot of the people that I debated, and how many people would come to me, they would say oh, I just like red flags. Oh, that's not the Soviet Union text. You think that's a real font? Oh, I just really like all the blah 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 blah.
I know the mic from Retracteds.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Stefan, were you getting bothered to debate Destiny? You brought up debates. I think I heard about that from Ethan Ralph in the Ralph retort that you were asked to debate Destiny or something like that. Do you remember that?
Yeah, so we batted the idea back and forth a little bit, but he's a little bit on the pro-violence side, as far as I understand it, and that's not a particularly good place to start debating from. And
that's true. Yep, he did say.
I mean,
that,
is that an unfair way to characterize it?
No, it's not. He did say that it's time to he's not taking it off the table. Political violence. I've gotten into a screaming match with him that I think was embarrassing for both sides. Precisely because I am not interested in looking intelligent or arguing intelligently with people. And I do, especially when I know that they are not arguing in good faith, that they're taking everything you're saying, trying to twist it to so that to be something they can argue with, or just not even bothering to understand you. I really hate that shit.
Well, it's team stuff, like if it's your team versus their team, nobody thinks that a sports team is a battle of moral absolutes. It's just, red team versus blue team or something like that.
It's just like me.
If it's a team-based thing, and when we were batting around topics, he just was kind of indifferent and offensive, and I'm just like, it just doesn't seem particularly inviting. But, I did a debate with Matt McManus recently, who was calling me out on Twitter, and I challenged him to a debate, and we had a really productive, it was a sort of one-on-one turned into a two-on-one because the moderator was on his side. But and then I just did one last night with the editor and publisher of Zero Books, who's a Marxist. So, I'm keen to do debates. I really do enjoy it. And but, I think people have to have some level of capacity to have a debate in order for it to be worthwhile.
The programming update, March 26th, we're inducting Dick Masterson into the Killstream Hall of Fame. It's going to be a roast-style ceremony. We have Brittany Venti confirmed, Mad Cucks confirmed. Andy Worski is actually going to be on the program as well. I'm working on a couple others. Dame's at least going to be there with a recorded message, and possibly Ricada as well, and maybe even Wang. So I'm still working on that, but I just want to give a programming update on that while you guys are trying
you should invite Destiny. Apparently he knows
you know what, actually that would be a good, that might not be a bad idea. I wonder if he'd be up for that. I think he probably would.
Probably would.
I'll send him a message, and now I'm busy trying